Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao. I'm on my way back from West Virginia. I'm not driving, but I wanted to open up the show, and I'll be back later in the week. Wanted to just welcome you to World Edition, this global podcast and show where we talk about global affairs, innovation, in an increasingly changing world. We also on Tuesday and Thursdays have World Politics, where we dive in a little bit more. With this year, a focus more on domestic politics as we prepare for the final debate before the Iowa caucuses between former UN Ambassador and Governor Nikki Haley and Governor of Florida Ron DeSantis. What I'll say today as we begin the show, I'm setting the table and then I've got to run out. But today, what we'll be talking about a World Edition is Secretary of State Blinken has actually indicated he's traveling to Israel to meet with the Prime Minister and Israel government. He is getting pressure from Jordan to call for an immediate ceasefire, and has indicated that he is really concerned about a war that continues to escalate in the Middle East. Whether this would have repercussions for U.S. foreign policy, of course it would, but what would it mean for the future of peace in the world? They found a Boeing 737 part of an Alaska Airlines flight that was missing. That's going to help the Transportation Safety Board look into the details of that tragedy. Bangladesh's prime minister just won a fifth term, which is very, very interesting. And the one thing I'll say as we prepare the show, and of course this might bleed into economics Monday and other shows, is the economy. So I attended a number of forecasts yesterday, this last week in Cary and Raleigh, and what we found out is that the interesting thing is that it does seem that most of the economists say that we are going to avoid a global recession, although Dr. Michael Walden from NC State says that it could still be a bumpy ride to recovery. What's interesting is that the economists say that inflation will come down to probably 3%, but that doesn't mean the prices will come down. But what could save President Biden is the fact that if we avoid a recession, you could see an uptick in the economy. Unemployment numbers are down, which is good. The other thing that's interesting, which I think we'll talk on global politics probably tomorrow, is how the Biden administration hasn't really been talking about the fact that the trillions of dollars of money that have come in have actually helped us quite ironically avoid a recession, because Americans have been actually not spending all that money. They've been saving all that money. So it is unusual that we were predicted to hit a global recession and we haven't. Now, things could change. Honestly, the only reason that's really holding him back from the presidency, in my opinion, is his age. I think if he was in 60s or 70s, the American people might not be so bad. But even his own party believes, and the American people, many believe, that 83-year-old is too old to be the president of the United States. Maybe that'll be the reason Donald Trump does win, even though he's in his late 70s. But we'll be talking about it on global politics. But good news for the Biden administration that we're going to be avoiding recession. But does that mean they're going to market what their administration does? They seem to be focusing so much on Donald Trump. Well, let's get started. Send us your ideas. I'm going to be heading off in 2 minutes, but I'm going to bring in Mark Lee. And Mark, thank you so much. And if you could send me the Economics Monday link, I'll try to make it today, but I'll definitely make it next week. But send that to me today too, right?
I'll try to get that to you, either me or Nick. And of course, we've got Nick with us. We've also got two folks from the West Coast that have joined us as well, that being Rick Rosner and, of course, Jim E. So they're up early in the morning, so it's very early where they are. And I see that Shaquille is here, and he may pop on at some point as well, all along. But we've definitely got some amazing conversations that we're going to look forward to, and all along those lines. Hey, this is actually for Nick, but Steve, you might want to take a stab before you leave. And I know that definitely him and Rick will have some thoughts. But, there have been a lot of protests, and sometimes the protests are stopping the traffic. And, there's always been the question, I guess, from a legal standpoint, as to whether it is all right to do a protest if you are impeding traffic. We've seen that here in the United States. I know you brought it up in the past and everything, Nick, and I saw that the German farmers were blockading Berlin with tractors in a subsidy roll. So they were dealing with subsidies, and definitely upset of some of the things that are going on in that particular European nation. And I do remember the Canadian truckers and all along those lines. So I guess the question I've got for everybody is, how much right do you have to impede traffic if you are doing a protest, whether it is around abortion, whether it is around a number of other hotbed issues, or whether you're doing it kind of like these folks are doing it over economic causes? And I'm sure there have been some of those in California as well.
Well, I'm going to think. I don't really know, Mark. I mean, I just think that we're having this continued focus of labor and the shortages of workers, and I think that this is going to be, we are victim held hostage to these workers who are doing so much to bring value to our economy and commerce. So, I think you'll continue to see these kinds of protests. I just don't know whether it's okay to block roads and things like that because you have safety concerns getting logistics out to people and supply chains are no longer disrupted after COVID, but once you disrupt supply chains, you could actually trigger loss of the economy. But I got to run, guys, but I'll be back later today or definitely Wednesday. But make sure you talk about the Middle East, get an update on Ukraine, and
Yeah,
thank you all, folks.
yeah, we'll get to all of that as well and everything. But Jim and Rick and Nick, if y'all have any thoughts about that as
Yeah,
well.
we in LA we have two of the worst, most congested freeways in the country, the 101 and the 405. Traffic's not moving on those anyway, so yeah, go ahead and walk through traffic with your signs.
It's kind of a cynical view, but at the same time, your rights end when you start interfering with other people's rights, Mark. So so it goes back to it just depends. If you get a proper permit and the roads are blocked off by the government, then hey, that's the way it goes. But if you sui sponte ad hoc decide to, hey, I'm going to go block a road, you need to be arrested. And as one sheriff in Hillsborough County where I live said, look, if you don't move this party out of the way, we're going to send buses and arrest people in mass and put them in jail where they belong. In other words, let them cool off in jail for several weeks and then see if the protest was worth it or not. But so it goes back to it really depends. Was it properly permitted? It's just like a parade. If it was permitted and they blocked off the streets and you have the support of the government, fine, you can block the roads. But can you go down to like Interstate 95 here, which is really busy, or the 540, and just take a bunch of people and block the road? The answer is absolutely not. And they need to spend some time cooling off whatever thing that they thought about in a jail, no less than 1 month. I would give them at least 1 month to figure it out. And if they decide to do it again, then you make it several months. I mean, it's just the way it is because frankly, it's wrong. When I was working hard, and I used to work hard before years ago, I had appointments to go to from next to next to next. And if you miss the appointment, you lose a lot of money. You spend a lot of money to get the appointment. And some jerk who thinks they can go block a road, forget it. It ain't going to happen, And so what it does, it actually leads to a lot more problems and doesn't solve any problems. Show me what problem it solves.
But Nick, along those same lines, and I did see your hand up, Jim and Rick, and everything along those lines, is this notion of some of the best protests weren't necessarily permitted. I don't know that the students at A&T University actually had a permission from the legal forces back in the 60s to do those famous sit-ins and all along those lines. And the same thing because we sit around Duke University and the Allen building where they literally sat down.
60s last time I looked was 40, 50 years ago, half a century ago. We're not living in the 60s anymore. We're living in, I think it's 2024. Mm-hmm. And so what applies today doesn't apply 75 years ago. And we're living in a country that has a lot bigger population than it did in the 60s. We also had a lot different problems than we do today. So as my judges would tell me, motion denied.
Jim, you had something you were trying to say, but I don't know if I'm hearing you or anything. So, say something again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Basically, you can go back to the 19th century and Henry David Thoreau. So this nonsense that it's the 60s, it's different. Come on. Civil disobedience has been part of the American history, and civil disobedience is not something that's wrong. However, I agree that Nick, that you have, once you do civil disobedience in whatever form it takes, there are consequences. Now, if you're putting fire hoses on people and sticking dogs on people, those are consequences that are incorrect. And we can argue about how much time you should spend in jail for protest. However, it's not something that you want to punish people to teach them a lesson. They're doing this consciously. They're trying to establish a knowledge of the problems that they're protesting about. So they're doing it to draw attention to themselves. When Ralph Waldo Emerson walked into the jail and asked Henry David Thoreau, "Why are you in jail?" Henry David Thoreau said to Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Why aren't you?" because the question is if there's something going on that is so wrong that you need to protest to draw attention to it, that's the American system too. So if you're late to an appointment, well, we're trying to protest against civil rights and people being murdered in their homes. I'm sorry you missed your appointment. I don't feel too terribly sorry for you in general, though, because this is American tradition, whatever century you're talking about. Civil protest is right.
I just have to respond to how wrong you are, Jim.
Yeah, except that you're wrong, Nick.
No. Civil disobedience, you're breaking the law. Breaking the law is wrong.
That's not true, Nick. They suffer the consequences. Nick, you're just wrong.
They think in their minds what they're doing are right. What you're telling me is what the Trumpsters did, because in their mind it was right, and January 6th was correct. That's what you're saying, Jim.
No.
It isn't.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying
So
you
the thing
suffer the
is,
consequences.
how
Nick,
you would
listen,
back
pay
Trump?
attention.
How
Pay
you
attention
would
to what
back
I'm
Trump and
saying.
his civil
Don't put
disobedience
words in my
people
mouth, Nick.
boggles my mind, Jim, that you would actually back
That's
the
because
Trumpsters.
you're not
I don't.
listening to what
Well,
I'm saying.
Now, it's
Nick,
wrong
you're
then.
not
It was wrong
listening.
in the 60s.
I said
Civil
suffer the
disobedience is
consequences
wrong.
of your
Period.
action. The people
Period. The end. It's wrong.
on January 6th, 7th, they have to suffer the consequences of their actions.
That's true.
But
That's
along
what
those
I'm
same,
saying,
along those same
So
lines,
that's
there
not
was a
wrong.
hold on a second.
We
Along
live
those
in a
same lines, there
Listen
was
to what I'm
society. We
saying.
have
Pay
laws.
attention.
Laws, my
Change your
friend.
mind, Nick.
Let's bring it-
Because
bring
you're
it
wrong.
on.
Nick, hold on a second. Along those same lines, there was a protest that was done several years back. I think it was pre-COVID, even though I think they were relaunching it this year. But people that protested in what was called Moral Mondays here in North Carolina, they knew that they were going to get arrested when they marched into the legislative building. So they knew that already going in. They knew that at that particular time and everything. So they were already knowing that that was going to be an act of civil disobedience, as you were just saying, and as Jim was just saying. So Reverend Barber was letting people know that, you're going to get arrested and everything. So there are.
That's what I'm saying. It's right.
And it's wrong.
No,
Okay?
it's not
the
wrong,
thing is,
Nick. That's
you
where
can't
you're
make
wrong.
breaking the law that people work hard at to be correct because you think better, Donald Trump, and the
No.
liberal Donald Trump supporters
Pay
that are on this
the
TV,
consequences,
which
Nick.
shocks
That's where
me
you're
that
not
Jim
drawing the
Reed is
dot.
actually supporting Donald Trump and his insurrection.
Pay the consequences, Nick. Donald Trump needs to pay the consequences. Everybody that went into the Capitol
Okay.
has to pay the consequences. So when you do civil disobedience, you pay the consequences. Get it through your head, Nick. People pay the consequences. They know what they're doing. They expect to get arrested.
Right.
Henry David Thoreau expected to get arrested. He got arrested. He went in jail. Understand the principles behind the actions. Pay attention,
Rich,
Nick.
Yeah, hold on a second.
I just got our kids over in England, and we're much worse at mass action than people in Europe. They have strikes and protests much more frequently than we do, and there have been positive effects of that. In France, they get like 6 weeks paid vacation every year and much better like hours, working conditions. It's hard to get mass action going in the U.S. We're a huge ass country with 5.5 times as many people as a European country. So,
But Rick, speaking of protesting along those lines, I actually saw an interesting story, and I wish that Steve was back here and everything, because it's something that he brings up all the time. And I definitely want to hear from Shaquille and Sasha, particularly Sasha, since he's in the investment space. Apparently there is I think it might be in California where you are, Rick and Jim, but there is a robot created fast food restaurant. And they are saying that so pretty soon, that in several years, we will see more of this. So the fast food workers that are now fighting for $20 an hour or whatever, or $15 an hour, it may be a moot point because the robots may be coming and doing the burgers and everything along those lines. And apparently they are quite efficient. They are more efficient than the humans, and they are able to do it quite quickly and all along those lines. So as I was watching on another news channel and news show, they were saying that this could be the thing of the future. So there might be a massive influx of people getting laid off because the robots are going to be taking over the low-paid jobs. So any thoughts around this? Because like I said,
the future's already here. When you check out your own stuff at the supermarket, you're basically a robot is doing the job of the person who used to bag your groceries and
but
and
I
ring it
don't
up.
see any problem with that. This allows the people that have more capital to make more money. And so the thing is, you get rid of these low paid jobs, let them go find some high paid jobs, and if they can't do it, too bad. Life is tough in the big city. Plus, what you just said, they're taking over low fast food jobs. It's horrible for you anyway. So the thing is, if it's cheaper, the capitalists make more money. Fine. We exist in a capitalistic system. We exist in a system which winner takes all, and everybody else ends up on the streets. What's wrong with that?
That's
Shaquille,
nonsense, for one.
Shaquille, what's your thoughts on this? Because, like I said, I do know that it's been probably in there in Australia. And they were literally talking about the days these robots would be able to make the burger. So it wasn't just the jobs that y'all were talking about with the counting the money and the bagging and the things along these lines. But apparently, they have robots that literally can make the burger for you. And apparently, it's as good as any high-end burger that you're going to get as well. So what's your take on this idea of the robots taking over
Well,
these jobs?
Let me first address the issue about protesting. Happy New Year, by the way, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed the festive season. Rick Rosner and our friend over there, our chess playing friend over there, Jimmy, both contacted me over the festive season, and you're not going to believe this, mostly because I'm making it up. And they both said to me, we are so tired of the government wanting to provide social services. We really agree with you on this lack of taxation. We should have lower taxes and total laissez-faire government and get rid of all these government programs. So I said, absolutely, that sounds good. And I said, well, how do we do this? How do we achieve this? And because they're both very intelligent people, they didn't actually suggest to me that I should hold up traffic. So what I will say about holding up traffic, and especially with this Just Stop Oil crew, is it's not just about people missing their appointments. Ambulances can be stuck. This can actually have some pretty severe impacts on people's lives. What I would say is, I think you should absolutely be able to protest. Even if I don't agree with what you're protesting about, you should be able to do so. And you should be able to do so in a way which is disruptive. What I would caution people about is when you create something which is too disruptive, it doesn't make people look at your cause and go, yep, that's a cause for me. And you might think that you're absolutely right. For example, I think that taxes are too high, but more importantly than taxes being too high, I was just asked this question by a politician who I'm not going to name in the last couple of days, who said to me, would you prefer lower taxes and a system that you don't like, or a system that provides the things that you like, but you have to pay a little more? And I actually said, I'd prefer to pay a little bit more. I actually wouldn't evade taxes if I felt, or try to minimize taxes if I felt that the government was doing the right thing. So I think most people are in that position. People don't care if they're paying into the system, but they want to be seeing value for what they're paying. Point being that when you go and protest and disrupt everyone else's life, they're not going to sit there and go, wow, awesome. I just missed my job interview. I'm 18 years old going for my first job, and it's a tough job market. And I missed my interview and I don't get the job. But because I didn't get the job, wow, I'm going to jump on your cause. That's just something that doesn't happen. As for bots,
yes,
I don't have to play chess with Jimmy, who I haven't played with before. But when I get to California in a few months and meet with him, I don't intend to get my ass kicked, but that's what's going to happen, right? But if Jim said to me when I got there, look, I've created a bot who's going to do exactly the same thing as I would have done, that's not going to be as fun, right? Because maybe I can give Jim a couple of shots of tequila, maybe I can try to, mess him up a little bit, and maybe I'll be able to, sneak a move that isn't really legal and be able to beat him. I think that's the thing with AI. People get, I think, too concerned that AI is going to displace us as humans. And my personal opinion is I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that, yes, AI is going to displace some jobs. There's going to be other jobs that will fill that void. I think we're okay. And I think that people need to get out of this idea that the future looks bleak. And the last thing I'll say is that includes in relation to politics. Donald Trump being 3 years younger than Joe Biden, I don't know why Republicans are trying to make the argument that Joe Biden's too old. Yeah, okay, he stumbles over his words and this and that.
He always did.
He unfortunately on the numbers, actually Joe Biden looks pretty good. I don't think he's going to win the next election. I really don't. And that's not because I prefer Donald Trump or I don't prefer Donald Trump. I just don't think that he's going to win the next election. I can't see that happening. And a lot of that has been because of poor media coverage on the right. But if you ignore the media coverage, it's actually really bad messaging from the Democrats. And often it's come across as being this holier than thou. Well, we're on the side of the angels because we're going for this race thing or this LGBTQ thing or whatever. And that is not what I think people are focusing on. And because of that, it looks like they don't care about the economy. It looks like they don't care about, healthcare or this or that. The only thing they're focused on is race relations. And I think that's been what's been damaging to them. The Republicans look like they don't care about those issues, but it looks like they do care about the things that they're talking about, immigration, the economy, etc. One weak spot for the Republicans is going to be the abortion issue. But I don't see Biden.
But Shaquille, but they do stumble over their words occasionally too. Because I was watching the kind of conversation around Nikki Haley and the whole notion of whether slavery was the central reason behind the Civil War. But I also watched Donald Trump's answer, and it was kind of one of the stumbling answers that he gave as well, which is basically that he thought that he would be a better negotiator in the situation if he had been around. So he basically turned it around to make it about Donald Trump, which is what Donald Trump does quite often in everything. He's like, basically, I could have done a better job of negotiating versus say.
Rick and Jim have had their hands
right,
up.
so
respond very quickly to what he said, and then I'll hand the floor to you. I'm just going to go for 5 minutes. I need to adjust the position in the markets. I'll just say this very quickly. Firstly, that was a shitty answer from Nikki Haley. I do believe, what she said. I think that this is probably somebody that was there just to try to evoke a crap answer from her. But yeah, it was a rubbish answer from her. Just like when Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black, or whatever he said. That was a shitty statement. Mm-hmm. Nobody's perfect, right? People are going to say things, especially in politics. People are going to say things that just don't quite, match what they would have said if they had more time to think about it. So I'm not too worried about Nikki Haley. I don't think she's going to get the nomination right now. Whether she'll get it later, I don't know. Same thing with Ron DeSantis. I think that he will get the nomination in a future period. I don't think he's going to get it right at the moment because Donald Trump's just too strong there at the moment. But I'm not too bothered about them saying something silly. As for Donald Trump, taxes was a major part of the Civil War. It's not just about slavery. Slavery was a big part of it, but taxes and government control was also something that was in play during that time. We know that Abraham Lincoln had actually said that he would concede on the issue of slavery in return for getting other concessions from the South. So I think these issues are complicated. And I think for even those of us that read the historical accounts, we don't really know what was going on because we didn't live there. We weren't there at that time. And so what I would say is for Donald Trump to say that he would be a better negotiator, he has no basis on which to say that. He doesn't.
And that's the point I was making and everything. Before you depart, I know you got to deal with the market and everything. I did see, because, that was a whole conversation around here in the U.S. around certain symbols and all along those lines. And I did see in the news that Australia was in the news because apparently y'all have outlawed the Nazi salute and the hate symbols. But I don't know enough about this story, so I want to know if you were hearing anything from the Australian news media about this particular story and what is behind it. Because apparently,
I think I should let Rick and Jim, who've been patiently waiting, speak. I will just say I haven't heard of what you've said, but I don't agree with that.
So I just wanted to say that
heretics are.
I just wanted to say that former President Obama agrees with Shaq that he spoke out over the weekend saying that the Democrats have to get way better at messaging and they should hire his campaign people, and because Obama's people, they won 2 presidential elections, and Biden's people have said that they are now working with Obama's people to get some better messaging.
Yeah. Jim, did you have something you were going to add to?
I do, but I've gone once, and maybe Sasha's turn now. And if Sasha passes, I'll speak after him.
Well, I saw this program with Nikki Haley and DeSantis. It appears to me that it's some kind of a fight for second place. They both seems to be conceded to Trump, and unless he will have some legal impediments, I think he will definitely fly and will get Republican nomination. And actually, next couple of weeks will be quite interesting in this what Supreme Court will decide on different issues. And in this case, all these debates, Republican debates, are really much ado about nothing to me.
And we're 1 week away from getting feedback with the Iowa caucuses.
Right, exactly.
From real voters.
That's right.
Jim, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One is that we don't live in a winner-take-all society. That's an unregulated capitalistic view, which we don't have. We haven't had for a long, long time. We have a regulated capitalist society, and those regulations are there to protect people from monopolies. In particular, over a century ago, Teddy Roosevelt ran on bust the trusts, which are the same as monopolies, and the idea of people being able to get so much control and so much power that they can eliminate competition and squeeze the less fortunate. That was something that we as a country gave up on that vision a long, long time ago. So there has to be room for compassion whenever we're talking about any issue. And these types of things, I think people have the right to protest. I totally agree with what Jack was saying. They have to be willing to pay the consequences for their actions. And so far, that's the big question around the insurrection at the Capitol. There are people that have paid the consequences. Proud Boys have been found guilty of insurrection, but until the people at the top, people who masterminded that, pay the consequences, there's no justice. And as far as the answer, I totally agree that people sometimes trip over their words. Joe Biden was famous for stumbling over his words when he was young. It's not necessarily a function of age in his case, and you can always get certain people that say the wrong things at the wrong time and then magnify that. That's part of the messaging. Totally agree that the Democrats have not been strong on messaging. Totally agree with Obama, because the economy is actually great. The economy is doing extremely well, and that message is not going out at all. The problem with the inflation, which Biden inherited, was based on the COVID pandemic, which broke down the global distribution system, and prices went up not just in the United States, but on the globe. It was a global breakdown of the distribution system, and it was a global inflation that followed it. And the one country that's doing phenomenal is the United States. Unemployment is down incredibly well down. Jobs are more plentiful. Wages are better. People are buying products, even though because of inflation, the products cost more now, and they might not cost less for a long time, but people are buying. So the consumer spending is still there. There's no threat of a recession, although I think the Fed tried to create an artificial recession by stupidly raising interest rates to the levels that they did. Now that they're willing to lower them, I think that people will be able to borrow money, start small businesses.
Yeah, a bit of interference there from a second there, but I did get most of what you were saying. Hey, this is for everybody on the panel. And speaking of messaging, and as some people on this show know, when it comes to religion, I have certain views and everything. But in terms of where I went to university, I definitely went to a Catholic university. And speaking of messaging, apparently they're sending out some mixed messaging that I'm not quite understanding, and maybe some folks have some thoughts around it, because the Vatican is looking at celibacy being optional for their Catholic priests, and they're saying that priests should be allowed to marry and all along those lines. And on the flip side of that, Pope Francis just recently called for a global ban on surrogacy. And I'm trying to figure out what would be the problem with having a surrogate parent, because that seems to me what adoption and foster parent are. But apparently he's calling it deplorable. he used that word that we know got into politics and everything. But I'm trying to figure out the reasoning that surrogate parenting would not be something that the Catholic community, as well as other communities, might be going against and everything. And I'm not quite understanding this, because he's going for a universal ban on surrogacy in a global roundup of threats to peace and human dignity. So, like I said, I thought a surrogate parent would be similar to like a foster or an adoption. So I'm not trying to quite understand why we would be against the surrogate parents. But if anybody's got any ideas or any thoughts, please let me know.
I'll go after Sasha.
Yeah.
Sasha.
I would like to add something to a question of of responsibilities connecting with resurrection, and people are paying the prices. That a lot of them are now in jails, being convicted, and so on. That's very interesting if you compare it to what's happened in Germany when it was defeated in Second World War. So the price actually was paid by top generals during the Nuremberg process. And they were the main culprits of what's happened to Germany in the 30s, 40s of last century. Now here in the United States is completely opposite situation. The soldiers, all these Proud Boys and all the other characters, they are paying the price, while people who masterminded this horrible situation, they are insulated and perhaps will never be brought to justice. This is incredible. This is why U.S. legal system definitely not the top in the world, and desires a lot to be done to it.
No, Shaquille, you had something you were going to add?
Well, I'll just say, as somebody who came from a Muslim family but grew up in the Anglican Church, obviously I have some theological differences of opinion with the Catholics. I don't think that celibacy is healthy. I don't know what you're referring to with Pope Francis saying that priests perhaps don't need to be celibate. But if you're going to say that for the priests, I think you should probably say that for the nuns as well. I certainly would suggest that both nuns and priests would have a greater understanding of families and the things that people go through that confide in them for advice if they had families of their own. Having said that, we don't want to go down the path that we've seen with many of the evangelical movements in the US, where somebody has an extramarital affair and is then booted out of the church and is booted out of the positions that they have. So I think this is a difficult road to kind of navigate for the church. Just back to Jim's comments, look, yeah, I do think that the Democrats have been poor in messaging. I'm not totally going to agree that the economy is doing well. The stock market's doing well. I think that other economic factors may be at play, but that's just my opinion. I'll respectfully not 100% agree with you. I don't 100% disagree with you either. What I'll say is this: I've never 100% blamed Biden for inflation. There is some things that I think that he has done which has been inflationary, but I've also put that same criticism at Trump. If Trump was to bring manufacturing back to the United States, like he says, like he's going to fix all the problems all on his own, if he actually got what he has articulated that he wants for the United States, it would have an inflationary effect. So I don't blame Biden completely, but I also, as a result, don't give him all the credit for inflation coming back down, because inflation has come down across the world as well. And one of the reasons for inflation coming down was the increase in interest rates. So look, I think that these issues are a bit more complicated, but when it comes to messaging, I'll give you a chance, Jim, just let me finish. When it comes to messaging, I think from my perspective, one of the biggest issues that I see is that it appears as though the focus is on things that a big part of the population don't really care too much about or feel attacked by. And that is race relations in the LGBTQ community and the issue of gender relations, the issue of that there's some sort of inherent unfairness in the United States, that there's a group of people that do very well, and they do very well as a result of or caused by this other group of people not doing very well. That isn't really my experience in the Western world. It hasn't been my experience in the United States. And I think a lot of people feel very attacked. And when they think that that is the focus of government policy, I think that that tends to get people's back up a little bit, and they don't want to listen to it. So I think the Democrats need to come back a little bit more to, we are here for everybody. And in the absence of them doing that, centre-right parties like the Republicans, I think, do quite well with their messaging. This is the same thing on the flip side. When you look at centre-right political parties in the US and around the world, abortion, climate change, etc., they do a really poor job of that because they make it look like they only care about the economy. They couldn't care less about the planet. So I think that both parties need to change their messaging on things. But I think right now, I think people are getting a little bit tired of being attacked for white privilege or straight privilege or whatever it may be. Over to you, Jim, and then to Toby.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Toby because I've already spoken, but I do want to get back to you, Shep. We both agree and disagree.
Toby, any thoughts?
Just to touch into, I don't know if Jim was going to jump into a little bit of the economy part of it, but I'll leave that to Jim because by every metric right now, the economy is doing well. But then to talk about the messaging, the Republican Party has always had the best messaging. They haven't had the best of policies. However, they've always had the best of messaging. And they've been able to push out things to where people do believe that, oh, well, I'm being attacked. And that is honestly their centralized message right now is that from Trump himself being the vengeance tour, I'm attacked, you're being attacked, people are coming after you, I'm protecting you, so on and so forth, where the Democrat Party, their messaging has honestly been more centralized and more towards a unification of the actual populace, because there are laws, policies, and things that have happened to different communities that we have never been honest about. For example, the many minorities still receive 70% less in loans when they go to the bank, and that isn't protected. Women are still paid less than men. Same thing with other minority groups. I mean, so these are things that we should be attacking and addressing. But the messaging, of course, when you're talking about the two parties themselves, yes, the messaging from the Republican Party of you're being attacked, they're only doing this to take away from you. Immigrants are infiltrating the country. That means, and instead of looking at immigrants as how much they actually provide to the actually economy and actually take over jobs that nobody else is doing and actually do a lot and actually are the safest community because they have the lowest crime rate compared to native-born Americans. So it's just the messaging that the GOP does is phenomenal. That is what they do. And when they do these, you're being attacked, the infiltration, all this stuff, that plays on fear, and fear sells. The only one that sells more is sex, but fear sells big time.
But not necessarily. The Republicans have only won the popular. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'll defer to you, Rick, after I'm done. But I did want the opportunity to say that, Fed increasing the interest rates at the start of the COVID pandemic was nonsensical. It was a typical response to, if you see an overheated economy, you raise interest rates to slow it down. But that's not what was going on. And the lowering of the rates is not fighting, it's not a response to inflation. What it is, because the economy is cooling. That's not what's going on. What's going on is the global distribution system was broken and it's now been repaired. And so now inflation is starting to tick down. The rate of inflation in the third quarter was 3% in the United States. Now, what I'm talking about is the economy is doing so well. Compare it to Germany, compare it to Britain, compare it to other places in the world. The U.S. economy is doing remarkably well. And all the metrics, I already went over some of the metrics that go into, unemployment down, jobs more plentiful. People can quit jobs because they know they can find them now. The wages have gone up. This is an economy where people are saying they will say when they're polled, the overall economy is poor, but I'm doing well. There's a disconnect between these perceptions. And
Can I just say something very quickly to you, Jim, which I want you and Rick to comment on? One of the biggest criticisms of California is the incredibly high rate of homelessness. And Travis pointed this out on a show late last year, that in Western Australia, which has a population of 1.6 million, there's 70,000 homeless people, which I did the maths on that really quickly and went, holy crap, that's like you guys having a homeless population like 7 times what you have. And yet California gets a lot of criticism. Australia looks relatively conservative, and yet that's just brushed over. And I think, again, this is something that people need to pay attention to, which is that not all leftist policies is just there to hand out money and make things worse. Not all right-wing policies, the same thing, makes things worse. But
right.
It's something that just
happens. And if I may have the floor back, Chuck, thank you. Sure. The idea of this, white privilege, the fact is that we have systematically discriminated against others. And what we have tried to do is level the playing field. Now, what this is a very complicated problem. And all the solutions are not necessarily the same. None of them are terribly effective. All of them are open to criticism. But the fact of the matter is, we want a level playing field. And how we get there, I don't know. I'm not sure that anybody does. But I do know that systematic discrimination over time has led to the disadvantagement of some. And we need to level the playing field.
Hey,
and
Jim,
so when we talk about, oh my God, I didn't get into Harvard because I'm white. I'm not going to cry you a river over that. There's been centuries, decades of systematic discrimination, and we're trying to level the playing field, and we're not that good at it yet. Maybe we'll get better at it. But, these are things that people need to get behind. Be part of the solution rather than the problem.
Speaking of solutions and everything, and this is actually coming back to what Shaquille was just talking about and everything, there has been a notion in some of these urban areas. I've even heard it proposed even around here in North Carolina and everything, but definitely out there in California, there are a number of empty office spaces. So there is a push to put the homeless in those empty office spaces. I think there's even been some proposals there in San Francisco, and you can correct me if I am wrong in that, Jim, and everything. But what is our notion? Because apparently there is a push to convert some of these empty spaces, because we do know a lot of people came back to work in their home offices versus being in those offices into some designated homeless spaces and all along those lines. So could that alleviate the homeless problem here in the United States and in the West in general?
Let's Rick.
I was taught when we studied homeless I was on a city council thing, that homeless people consist of, people with substance problems and people with mental problems. And some people who are down on their luck can take advantage more easily of programs like that. But if somebody has mental problems, then they're going to need more extensive help to see if they can be righted, and maybe can't be.
And an office space environment just isn't going to work for that, Rick. I mean, that's the real problem with.
Well, there's a hotel down the street that they turned a famous old hotel, the Sportsman's Lodge, that they turned into homeless, for homeless people, all entirely over to homeless people during the height of COVID, and it was half-assed. It was okay. It didn't work that great.
Right. I think Jacoby's got his hand up.
Yeah, Jacoby.
Yeah, I mean, the homeless situation is a thing globally and even in the U.S. itself. I mean, from various states, from California, Vermont, Oregon, everywhere, North Carolina, all has homeless situation as a homeless problem. And it is a complex thing because, for example, Rick just talked about a lot of the homeless individuals have mental health issues. And there are mental health problems that are there. As a matter of fact, if I remember in our history, New York threw out a whole slew of mental patients onto the street because they didn't want to cover their costs and so on and so forth. So now it's just generation after generation, similar to immigration, how it's a problem that we don't really want to address the complex solutions because sure, we can throw office space there, but what else are we going to provide? What solution? Because some of those homeless people are down on their luck. Some of them just need a job. Some of them just need an opportunity. Some of them just lost their job because of COVID. So there are many situations. We have to look at it as a more comprehensive and complex solution rather than just throwing up office space and throwing people in, because yeah, Nick is right that it will not work just throwing homeless people in there, because what else you're not giving them anything. You're not helping them with anything just by giving them a home. There's more to it. There's got to be food. How are we going to provide solutions for food access? Because food is a huge thing that leads to a lot of crime. How are you going to deal with the crime issue that may come about? Because not saying that homeless people are inherently going to commit crimes, but poverty does lead to a lot of crime because people want and people need, and they're stealing because they need. And it's a solution for them because they don't have an opportunity elsewhere. So it's much easier. Like I said, it's much easier to say, okay, well, will the office space create the solution? There was one town that converted a mall into a homeless shelter. Again, there's more to it than just, hey, we're going to give you a place where you can, instead of putting a tent outside, you can put a tent in here. That's not giving me a full-blown comprehensive solution to helping the homeless problem. It's just another way to kick the ball down the road and say, I think I did a little bit of something.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's not that easy, Mark,
Well,
because when I was in Bellingham, I had a 10,000 square foot office with 34 offices on the 4th floor at the Pacific Meridian building where we had our company. Now, if we were to take the 34 offices and convert them to, let's say, homes, for example, you got some problems. Problem number one, there were no showers. There was just a restroom. Problem number two, there was no separate, entrances and stuff. You have no food. You have to go down an elevator to get food. It looks easy on the surface, but there's some conversion issues that have to take place to even convert an office building into a place for homes. Permitting, you're talking your years away, and frankly, it would be better just to go build homes or a complex somewhere else for that to actually serve people. But office buildings, just for the most part, they're just not designed to hold people.
That's right.
I don't agree with that, because I was just looking at office space in Western Australia, for example, and a particular office building, or several office buildings, I can get for $100 a square meter, where residential property is going for $1,500 a square meter. So putting a few showers in there wouldn't be difficult. We have this problem. I'll just address a couple of things. I want to come to quickly what Jim said before about Crimea River. If you're white, you can't get into Harvard. I have such a big problem with that. And one of the reasons I have a problem with that is something that I hear a lot of Americans say to me, for example, which is, well, you should really support Kamala Harris because she has in part the same ethnicity as you. No, she doesn't. She's a Tamil Indian, right? She's a Tamil Indian. Now, if you look at what has happened in India over the last, hundreds of years, and especially with the regardless of the British interference into that region, there is a lot of differences that Indians see amongst each other. So when Americans say, well, this group of people, Indians, for example, have done very well in the tech space, so we're going to preference other ethnic groups, to those Indians who are only just beginning to get into that, to be told, well, we Americans feel that you look the same. We feel that you're the same ethnicity, regardless of the fact that you're completely different people, different religions, different beliefs, etc. That can be really offensive and deeply insulting to many of those Indians that were actually left behind over the centuries. And, that they've got the caste system in India, for example. President Modi, who is quite popular at the moment, that might be fine in India. But one of the reasons why he's quite popular is because of this national push and a very Hindu-based thing that he's doing. The problem with that is not just some of the division that's created in India, but for Indian diaspora, like my family, who have lived for a couple of hundred years in Fiji, where they gave up all the caste system stuff, they gave up all the religious stuff, and they all just joined together, and all of a sudden tensions are being inflamed. amongst the Indian community in Fiji and South Africa, etc. A lot of that gets missed. And I feel like a big part of the problem is the fact that the US media, the US way of doing things, they come up with policies in the US and they push that across the world in such a way that when you then try to say, hey, hang on a second, like we're actually still oppressed, it's just that other part of people that, according to you, look like us have succeeded, that message gets lost. And I think that because most other minority groups in the world would struggle to compete against the African-American community in the US when it comes to who's the greater victim, there's a lot of groups that become quite resentful. And the immigrant community in the US and elsewhere are a very big part of the people that are feeling very resentful about this kind of messaging. And that's why I think the Democrats are going to have a bit of a messaging issue coming into the next election.
Well, I don't agree at all. And I think you conflated two completely different topics. You know, the white person who can't get into Harvard, I don't feel sorry for. But that's got nothing to do with the caste system in India. It's got nothing to do with U.S. trying to propagate policy across the world. You know, these are two completely separate issues. The first issue is that we are trying to level the playing field, giving people who are denied an opportunity. And it's a complicated and messy problem to solve. So let's not make it even worse by conflating other issues along with it. You know, one of the things that I wanted to say was, you know, I'm the confirmed Roman Catholic, you know, and Pope Francis is considered to be, by the conservative Catholic community, very progressive. And so some of the things I didn't even hear about the surrogate problem, and it doesn't sound like him. I don't understand it. But, you know, obviously, question of celibacy, that's from an old patriotic system. I'm sorry, not patriotic. Patriarchal. Paternalistic, that hegemony that was involved, and it was just a power structure that was in place for centuries and centuries and centuries. And, you know, it's breaking up. So, you know, this idea of, only men can be priests, that's going to go away. And the idea that you have to remain celibate, that's going to go away. We know.
How about Jim, the vow of poverty? The nuns have to take a vow of poverty, but the priests don't.
And it's the bishops that were the most powerful. And they had lots of wealth. And if you couldn't be born into the royal family, you wanted to be a bishop. So that was the way to power. So all of these things are very questionable in terms of, like sorting out the real facts, the wheat from the chaff. And, you know, we have a lot of difficulties. And with homelessness, you know, I wanted to say that I had a person on the show for NAMI. NAMI is, I think the pronunciation is National Association for Mental Health. And this is the idea that they had ways of helping the people that were mentally ill, getting them off of the streets. It can be done, but we don't do it by fighting amongst ourselves. And I think the Republican messaging of fear is not the answer, of making people the other. Just a moment, Jack. I got the soapbox for now. And the answer of trying to make the other people the other and hate them is never going to work. And it's getting in the way of dividing the country. I live in the divided states of America. And when we're going to get unified again, it's not because we're going to be uniform. We don't have to look alike. We don't have to sound alike. We don't have to dress alike. We don't have to think alike. But we do believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that should be for everyone. And if you're denying that to a fellow citizen, I'm against you. And so it's a problem that we have as a country, that we're starting to think us against them instead of us together, because we're better together than we are apart.
Can I ask a question for Rick and Jatovi to respond to, because I know it's relevant to what you just said. In relation to mental health, as you guys know, my family are in mental health. What do you do with those people who clearly need mental health but won't voluntarily seek it, or people that won't continue to take their medication, things like that? What do you force them to? There's a problem, of course, in the UK, Europe, Australia. It's a
complicated issue. We should move on, Shaq. That's a complicated we but it was addressed on the show. You could watch it. It's on my website.
Well, I'm just bringing it up as a topic for those guys.
It's a very tough question, but we don't want to take.
Yeah, we were almost out of time anyway. But it's
Rick, you're first.
Rick first.
Jatovi was before me.
All right.
No, Rick, you were first, and then I
all right. So for all their messaging, the Republicans have only won the popular vote in a presidential election once since 1992. And the Republicans steadily move farther right, which is both an opportunity and a problem for Democrats because there's more of the center to occupy. But because you occupy the huge center and the left, people on both sides, conservative Democrats and independents and liberals, are both going to be pissed at centrist Democrats. And the whole thing is being gamed out and has to be gamed out. Black people are 12% of the US population. Somebody in some office is saying, how do we keep Black people who turn out strongly for Democrats and don't piss off these other groups? Latinos, 30% of the population. But tending to move towards the Republicans. How do we get them to turn out, make sure women continue to turn out strongly? There's all this demographic gamesmanship. It's going to leave a lot of people a little pissed off at the Democrats, but we can hope that not so pissed off that they vote for, some lunatic like RFK Jr.
Toby?
Yeah. Just to point out, I completely agree with what Jim was stating about, one, conflating the two issues, and two, again, my whole thing this year has been talking about honesty and being honest about it. Yes, white privilege is a real thing. And at some point, we have to acknowledge that. It's not saying that individuals who are white are racist or anything. No, it's just accepting that, hey, if I'm tall, I can reach things on the top shelf a short person cannot reach. It's just having the privilege and the knowledge and understanding that, yes, it's sad and it sucks that we're still in this world where a skin tone does actually provide extra opportunity, but that's where we are, and it hasn't changed yet. And it's slowly moving. At one point, it was moving a little bit better, but now because of what happened with the platform that was given to Trump and what he actually propagated out there, that actually slowed that movement. And that gets to the messaging, what Rick and Jim touched on about how the messaging, and again, it's a message of fear, resent, and hate. That's all the message is coming out of. If you look at Donald Trump, everything he's saying and everything, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene calling the people that don't agree with her, the Democrats, the liberals, or whomever else, pedophiles, all this hateful things that the immigrants searching for asylum, they are invading, they are bringing drugs. There were who was that Republican senator that said they had calves like cantaloupes? I mean, a racist trope against a group of individuals just trying to search for help. So I completely agree with both Rick and Jim that the messaging is the key, and the Democrat Party does not have a great messaging solution, and the Republican Party does. And that messaging is what is right now dividing a lot of us and attacking, because by telling each other that your white privilege is, they're trying to call you racist and all this other, it's not true. It's just pointing out a fact of life that right now, at this moment, your black skin gives you 70% at a loan or a home loan. And less than somebody with white skin. It's a fact, and data is there. We just have to acknowledge it and work towards, hey, I don't hate you because you're white. I understand that there's a difference right now, but hey, let's work together to try and fix that difference, because if we don't work together to fix it, it's never going to be fixed. And I will say the irony of talking about America tries to treat other countries and other sects across the sex of different sections of India, and the irony behind that complaint is the same reason why there is division and racial division within the U.S. It's the same complaint, except for all you're saying is, hey, there's resentment towards America because you treat Indians as well. Okay, well, there are established laws and established things that happen in the U.S. that are treating minorities the same way you're complaining about, that are treating those individuals across the globe. Also, just to point out, the U.S. right now in the global view has its highest rating in terms of people hopeful around the U.S. in comparison to years past.
And that was actually the conversation that they had on the K Pasa Mohair show yesterday, because they were actually looking at some of the statistics. So that's the show that we do that features some Latin women talking about things going on in their society. And I think it was like some 60.4% were proud to be Latinos, and they were trying to figure out what the other percentage weren't as proud to be Latino. And they were also talking about the economic power. And I might not have the figures exactly right, but you can go back and watch that episode, which was on Sunday afternoon, and it will probably be re-aired several times during the course of the week on podtv.tv, K Pasa Mohair and everything. One of the economic issues that I was going to get to, and maybe we'll get to it on Economics Monday, is this notion of whether people want to fly Boeing, since Boeing is having some troubles and all along those lines. And on the media show, I was going to actually bring up something, and I may bring it up, and maybe you'll have some thoughts around it, around how we're going to have some very interesting conversations in the media, because apparently Cat Williams has been on a tear because of his Shannon Sharp interview, where he was basically calling out the Illuminati. So maybe we'll figure out some conversations as to whether they really exist and what Cat Williams was saying and all along those lines, because he called out Tyler Perry even and some of the dress wearing comedians and all along those lines. But right now we're getting ready to get on out of here, and we'll go to Economics Monday and Media Monday at 12, and maybe some of those conversations will come up in those shows as well. But right now we're getting ready to get on out of here. It was a lively discussion. We didn't get to that much of Ukraine and the Israel situation, but I'm sure we'll get to that on tomorrow, and definitely on world politics as well. But definitely had some very enlightening and interesting conversation on today. And we even had a civil conversation, which was a good thing to have sometimes on this show as well. So right now we're ready to get on out of here.